Today, so yesterday we talked about Marvel, the rise and fall of Marvel. And people said the real fall of Marvel really started with 2021. It really started at the end of Endgame. Yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home made, Far From Home made $1 billion, but other than that, Marvel was going to go downhill, mostly because of the pandemic. But what about the other Disney's biggest franchise? No, not Pixar movies, Star Wars. Today, we chat about the rise and fall of the Star Wars franchise. Well, actually, the series had two rise and falls. We'll get to the first one very shortly. But Star Wars was a franchise that not even its creator thought it would do well. George Lucas created an idea of a movie called Star Wars, and no one thought it would make money until Fox said, "Okay, we'll pick it up and not market it at all to see if no one will buy it, watch." Because they thought that no one would watch this movie, that this movie would be another flop. Because sci-fi movies back in the day were not really that popular and didn't really exist. Yeah, Planet of the Apes came out and 2000 A Space Odyssey existed, but other than that, Star Wars didn't really. It wasn't really any sci-fi epic movies. But then they released Star Wars, and to everyone's surprise, this movie was a huge, massive hit. They was the company was like, this Star. Remember this Star Wars movie that you put out? Well, it's making tons of money. If it does it for inflation, Star Wars: A New Hope would still be one of the highest grossing movies in all of history. And if he does it to today's movies, each of the original trilogy would have grossed over $1 billion in box office revenue. The original trilogy came out. We'll be talking about the first one, and it made so much money that started a series. Everybody loved this new series called Star Wars. Everybody loved it, except for that one person that didn't like Star Wars. But if you didn't like Star Wars, you could say it uncool. And then it made a sequel called The Empire Strikes Back, which is still considered to this day the best Star Wars movie of all time. Nothing could really top it. But then we released the last movie called The Empire Strikes Back. And actually, Star Wars is not called A New Hope, it's just called Star Wars. But these three movies were extremely successful, and throughout the 80s, Star Wars became this huge, massive juggernaut of a series. And people were surprised we didn't get any new movies of the Star Wars series. Yeah, we got they came up with a bunch of Ewok movies that nobody cared about, but they released games, toys, and everything. Star Wars was massive throughout the 80s and 90s. And then The Phantom Menace came out. This movie disappointed a lot of people. Star Wars The Phantom Menace is probably one of the most overhated movies of all time. Because people hate the movie just because of Jar Jar Binks. And ignore all the other things of the movie. But Star Wars Episode 1 disappointed most of the older Star Wars fans. This wasn't Star Wars. They added a character called Jar Jar Binks, which absolutely nobody liked. And this is the first downfall of Star Wars, the prequels. The prequels was something that people just didn't like. People didn't like Jar Jar Binks and all these changes to the Star Wars series. As you would warn throughout these downfall videos, people don't like change. Which is ironic as people were obsessed over trying to get wanting innovation in games and innovation in movie making in movies. But when they change something, and prequels are notoriously hard to make because you might ruin a series continuity. It is very hard to make a prequel. Thus ask the Life is Strange series as well. It was another series that also got a prequel that people didn't like. But Star Wars is the most notorious series for its prequels. These prequels became notorious. They made a second prequel, which is called Attack of the Clones, and the third one, which everybody considers the best, Revenge of the Sith. And overall, despite this, Star Wars is still extremely popular. Yes, there was a small downfall here. The actor of Jar Jar Binks really gained death threats on the early internet, and the actors literally getting harassed online on the early net, and yeah, it was very, very sad. And I don't even want to go through all the other horrible things they have said. And even down to this day, the actors' performances in these movies are still heavily criticized, especially Jar Jar Binks and, of course, Anakin Skywalker. But Star Wars, the prequels, eventually gained a cult following. The series eventually gained a cult following. And then we got the Clone Wars series. The Clone Wars series was very popular among TV and was mostly set in the prequel era. Well, and I think this series and this really popularized the prequel characters in the prequels, except for Jar Jar Binks, because really it brought more life into the prequels. We got to see other sides to many of the characters in these prequel movies in the Clone Wars series, and Star Wars is still pretty popular. Bro. And then 2012 is when the downfall of Star Wars started, when Disney bought Lucasfilm and of course put in Kathleen Kennedy. Most people didn't really hate Kathleen Kennedy. She actually helped work on a lot of big movies, including a lot like Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park, and a lot of big and popular movies. She helped produce and helped with a lot of movies. So a lot of people didn't really care about Kathleen Kennedy. See, people didn't really care. People thought, she's the new director of Lucasfilm. Yeah, who cares? This would probably be the worst decision ever made at Lucasfilm, making Kathleen Kennedy the director of Star Wars. And this is what started the downfall of the most popular franchise of all time. And this franchise is no longer the most popular franchise in the world, being replaced by a new video game franchise that was created in 1996 called Pokemon, and of course Marvel as well, and now Minecraft. But the Star Wars franchise didn't really have a real downfall until 2017, and we'll get to 2017 later, and the rise of an infamous Star Wars fan group as well. So in 2017, The Force Awakens came out. A lot of people liked The Force Awakens. It was kind of a very nostalgic movie. It introduced new characters as well, and brought back a lot of the old characters in this series, and brought new villains and brought new threats to the Star Wars franchise. It was overall a respected continuation of the Star Wars series. Rogue One also came out a year later, and also, Force Awakens also made $2 billion at the box office. Then Rogue One came out a year later. Rogue One also made $1 billion. This was a prequel to A New Hope, and it was definitely far better received than the original prequels. Yes, there was a lot of people who don't, and this is a movie that a lot of people like for going further on and further on. Rogue One is still well liked by the Star Wars community to this day, with the exception of those people who call the movie overrated. And the movie was praised for its CGI, it was praised for its practical effects and everything about it. And in 2015 and 2016, Star Wars was still extremely popular. Even the new characters were pretty popular as well. And then 2017 happened. This is the downfall of Star Wars. The Last Jedi. Everybody knows this movie. The Last Jedi still made $1.3 billion at the box office. But the movie literally divided the fan base. People thought the prequels were bad, and the prequels divided the fan base. The Last Jedi was essentially a death blow to Star Wars. It basically nearly killed the franchise. And yes, the Star Wars series had a glimmer of hope in the future, but we'll talk about that later. But The Last Jedi essentially divided the Star Wars fan base. Half the fan base liked the movie, and half the fan base hated the movie. Which impacted this started with the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace did not really like the new Star Wars series. They didn't like all the changes they made to the characters, including killing off Han Solo in The Force Awakens, adding a female protagonist in the series, and adding Rose Tico in the series, which this character would go on to basically be the most hated Star Wars character in history. She wasn't really that bad of a character. She was kind of just a side character, but it didn't matter. The character was so infamous and so hated. It made Jar Jar Binks. And I don't really like Rose Tico. She's kind of a pointless character. But that's really what. She isn't really a bad character. She's just pointless. She's just useless. Kind of like Sakura. Sakura isn't really a bad character per se. She's just useless. And people hate characters that are useless. Just look at Sakura from Naruto and Yamcha from Dragon Ball Z. People don't like useless characters, even if they aren't really bad characters, like Yamcha or Sakura or Rose Tico. This character made people hate Star Wars. And it isn't the last character to be in this category. New characters like Snoke, Rey, and Kylo Ren would get a lot of hate from the Star Wars fan base. And this will be criticized for ruining the characters. And then the worst thing they could have done was they killed off Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. This angered Star Wars fans. First, they assassinated Luke Skywalker's character, and then they killed him off. It kind of just made the fans angry. The last side didn't really make the fans happy. The fans of Star Wars weren't happy. And the ones that were angry the most were the Phantom Menace. They were always complaining about movies like The Force Awakens and Rogue One. But they were kind of a vocal minority. No one paid attention to them. But because of The Last Jedi, this group of people were propelled in YouTube because of their distaste of the new Star Wars. The taste of the new Star Wars propelled them into popularity and started the toxic fandom of Star Wars. And this was also around the time when the prequels were starting to get appreciated as well. A lot of people really started to like the prequels, people who grew up with the prequels. So it really was the older fans not liking the prequels. Then, Solo: A Star Wars Story came out, and it was the first Star Wars movie in history to lose money for Disney. And of course, they was being made by Fox, but it was the first Star Wars movie in history to lose money. This was a movie that they were projecting to make $600-700 million. The movie didn't even beat any other movies that made more money than Solo. Well, a movie that was supposed to flop, Alita Battle Angel, made more money than Solo, a Star Wars movie, which set boundaries. Solo was another movie that was heavily criticized. The new characters that people didn't really like, and of course the character assassination of Han Solo because they chose a different actor instead of de-aging, of course, Harrison Ford for this new Star Wars movie. I guess they had to choose a different actor for Star Wars for Solo, but they chose whoever they wanted to pick and not chose someone who was best fit for the role. And it really showed Disney's greed, a company that didn't really care for the fans. Kathleen Kennedy was also criticized for these movies as well. She was responsible for making these movies terrible. She made all these bad decisions that make Star Wars, from bringing a magical experience of a series to basically just absolutely hated among everybody. And then The Rise of Skywalker released, and that movie underperformed. It was the first time that a third movie in the trilogy underperformed the second movie in the trilogy. The first time that has ever happened. And Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker made less money than Joker, to say at least. The fact that a movie that literally was probably going to make $700 to $800 million at the very least beat Star Wars can show you all you can say about Star Wars. This is a franchise that is literally on life support at this moment. But in 2019, another series released alongside Disney Plus platform, and that was The Mandalorian. Despite the colossal failure of the sequel trilogy, The Mandalorian still released, and everybody loved it. But even Kathleen Kennedy and Disney still managed to screw up The Mandalorian. So when The Mandalorian released, the Mandalorian characters became very popular. But of course, Disney, not knowing The Mandalorian would be popular, even though despite knowing that Star Wars is a huge series, decided not to really put out any merchandise until a year after the show came out. Because they really didn't know that The Mandalorian was going to be popular. They really didn't know. And even then, the only thing that is really remembered from The Mandalorian is Baby Yoda anyways. And The Mandalorian became really popular and then everybody forgot about it. it just came and went. It isn't always yes, it is still talked about, mostly because of Baby Yoda's popularity, but this is what I mean. Even Disney screwed up The Mandalorian. We're not really getting another season of The Mandalorian, are we? We only got like 2 or 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. I think there's only like 2 or 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, and then they just stopped making it because even though the show was really popular, they just gave up because Disney just doesn't care. And they released a bunch of Star, and then all the rest of the Star Wars, and then the biggest slap in the face was the most recent one. Patty Jenkins' Star Wars Rogue Squadron was also just delayed indefinitely. So Disney still has no hope in the franchise. Despite putting a bunch of shows on Disney Plus and a couple Lego shows and movies on Disney Plus, Star Wars is just not as popular as it used to be. I think this is a franchise from the scale of the sequel trilogy. The sequel trilogy kind of made Star Wars into a laughingstock of a franchise. Even with The Mandalorian pseudo-reviving Star Wars, it wasn't enough. The Mandalorian did not revive Star Wars because even Disney managed to screw that up. Disney didn't understand that people really liked these characters, and they put out the toys when it was too late. All the Baby Yoda figures and the Mandalorian and the Mando figures. Yes. And the Mandalorian really peaked when they saw Luke Skywalker and the end of season 2. And then I don't think they made a season 3 of The Mandalorian. I actually gotta see how many seasons there are on. Yeah, I can see. Mandalorian. How many seasons are there? I really don't know, because there's only 2 seasons. So there's only 2 official seasons of the show. So at the end of season, so basically they made a season 2 in 2020, but there's no season 3. Because Disney, of course, screwed it up. And they're supposedly making a season 3, but there's no date on it, because of course Disney doesn't care. And really, once The Mandalorian ended, so did Disney Plus start to slow down in popularity. It really showed that Disney really screwed up The Mandalorian. Yeah, Wikipedia does say the show is ongoing, but The Mandalorian season 3 still has no date. I think it's supposed to release in 2022, but other than that, we really do not know if there will be a season 3 or not. But other than that, yep. Season 3 does exist, but they don't really know when it's going to release. Because, guess what? Disney casted another controversial actress because of Twitter. Yep, they casted Gina Carano. And then, that's another thing. Disney, instead of sticking to the gun and keeping her in the movie, they basically fired her from the show. So, even with that, even with the popular Mandalorian, Disney still managed to screw it up by firing actors because they made controversial tweets. Like, who gives a shit about Twitter? It's not the only social media platform out there. I don't know why people can't voice their own opinions online. And it really shows you. Disney basically ruined Star Wars. Star Wars isn't what they used to be anymore. If you watch the sequel trilogy and the first 2 sequels and the original trilogy and the prequels, the original and the prequels were made with love. The sequels were just a corporate cash grab designed to pull in the Twitter audience and designed to try to pull in older fans. And it just didn't work. Disney basically goofed up on Star Wars. And this is what even with the success of The Mandalorian, Disney basically screwed it up with not understanding The Mandalorian's popularity and firing Gina Carano for basically stupidest reasons ever. And even then, they basically gave her another show, basically saying, F you, The Mandalorian fans. You don't get to see Gina Carano anymore because, she is too controversial to be in our TV show, a very popular TV show on Disney Plus. And we're really seeing this at the decline of Disney Plus subscriptions. Disney Plus is really dying as well, which Disney is really scared of because they're expecting to have 200 million subscribers by the end of next year. And the fact that that's slow growth is also contributing to that. So yep, that's basically about this video. Goodbye.